There was a time when Bette Midler could walk onto a stage and make an entire room feel smaller. She didn't need elaborate effects. She didn't need to chase attention. Her voice, her humor, her expressions, and that unmistakable personality were enough. For decades, audiences watched her become one of the most recognizable entertainers in America. She was a singer who could move from comedy to heartbreak in the same performance. An actress who could carry a musical drama, a comedy, or a story about friendship. A Broadway star. A recording artist. A performer who seemed almost impossible to contain inside one category. But Bette Midler was not born into that world. Today, she is approaching 81. The woman who once seemed to belong permanently under bright lights has entered a very different stage of life. The crowds are different. The pace is different. And time has a way of changing even the most famous people. But to understand what that change really means, you have to go back much further than Hollywood. You have to go back to Honolulu. Because before there was the superstar known as Bette Midler, there was a shy girl growing up far from the centers of American entertainment, in a family that did not have money or connections waiting for her. Bette Midler was born on December 1, 1945, in Honolulu, Hawaii. Her parents were Fred Midler, a house painter, and Ruth Midler, a homemaker. Bette was one of 4 children, and by her own description, the family experienced a hard-scrabble childhood. This was not the glamorous beginning people might imagine when they think about a future superstar. There were no Hollywood producers around the corner. No powerful family name. No obvious path into show business. Instead, Midler grew up in Hawaii surrounded by ordinary family life and the natural beauty of the islands. And nature became important to her. As a child, she was shy. But the world around her gave her somewhere to escape. She later remembered finding comfort in the skies, the sea, flowers, birds, and the environment around her. That detail matters because the young Bette Midler was not yet the loud, fearless personality audiences would eventually know. The confidence came later. So did the performance. At school, Midler began discovering that she could entertain people. She entered talent competitions and won several of them. Eventually, she graduated as valedictorian of Radford High School. For a girl who had grown up far from New York and Los Angeles, that was already a sign that something unusual was developing. But she still had to figure out what to do with it. She attended the University of Hawaii and studied drama. Then, in 1965, she got a small opportunity that would change the direction of her life. She was hired as an extra in the film Hawaii, a major production based on James Michener's novel. It wasn't stardom. It wasn't even close. But it put her near the kind of world she had been dreaming about. And eventually, Midler made a decision that required more courage than talent. She left Hawaii for New York. That meant walking away from the familiar and entering a city where thousands of people were chasing exactly the same dream. New York was not waiting for Bette Midler. She had to make the city notice her. In 1966, she landed a role in the Broadway production of Fiddler on the Roof. It was her first major professional break. She remained with the production for several years, but Broadway did not immediately turn her into a star. And this is where the story becomes interesting. Because the path that made Bette Midler famous was not the path she originally expected. Broadway gave her experience. But it wasn't where she became Bette Midler. That happened somewhere much less conventional. The Continental Baths in New York. It was a gay bathhouse, and Midler began performing there on weekends. The setting was unusual, but the room gave her something Broadway hadn't yet given her: freedom. She could experiment. She could joke. She could sing. She could become outrageous. And she created a nightclub act unlike anything audiences had seen from her before. The shy girl from Honolulu was disappearing. In her place was a performer who could command a room. She became known as the Divine Miss M. And one of the musicians accompanying her at the piano was a young Barry Manilow, who at that point had not yet become the superstar audiences would know in his own right. The act grew. People started talking. Then people started coming specifically to see her. This was the beginning of something much larger. Midler had discovered that her greatest strength wasn't simply her singing voice. It was her ability to combine music, comedy, personality, vulnerability, and theatricality into one experience. She wasn't trying to look perfect. She was trying to be unforgettable. And eventually, someone with the power to change her career heard her. Atlantic Records president Ahmet Ertegun became aware of Midler and signed her to the label. In 1972, she released her debut album, The Divine Miss M. The gamble worked. The album became a major success, went platinum, and earned Midler the Grammy Award for Best New Artist. Suddenly, the woman who had once been performing in a New York bathhouse was standing on a much bigger stage. But success didn't erase where she had come from. It simply made the distance between those two worlds more remarkable. A girl from Honolulu had arrived in New York with little more than ambition. Now the recording industry was paying attention. Television was paying attention. Broadway was paying attention. And Hollywood was beginning to watch. Midler continued recording music, releasing albums including Bette Midler in 1973 and Songs for the New Depression in 1976. Her stage work also earned recognition, including a special Tony Award in 1974 for bringing additional excitement to the Broadway season. But music was only one part of what she was becoming. There was something about Bette Midler that made people want to see what she could do next. And in the late 1970s, that question would be answered in a way that changed everything. She was cast as Mary Rose Foster, a troubled rock singer, in the 1979 film The Rose. The role was demanding. It required Midler to carry a dramatic film while performing as a character whose life was spiraling out of control. The girl who had once been too shy to command a room had become a woman capable of commanding an audience across multiple forms of entertainment. But fame has its own price. The bigger Midler became, the more people expected from her. Every success raised the standard for the next one. Every failure became more visible. And after The Rose, she would learn just how quickly Hollywood could change its mind. Her 1982 comedy Jinxed failed at the box office, and for a moment, the momentum she had built appeared to weaken. But Bette Midler had already survived something more difficult than a bad movie. She had survived being unknown, and the next stage of her career would prove that she was nowhere near finished. Because the woman who had started in Honolulu, fought for a place in New York, built a strange and unforgettable nightclub act, conquered the recording industry, and earned an Oscar nomination, was about to enter one of the most successful periods of her entire career. And that success would eventually bring her something she had never experienced before. A life where almost every part of her identity became public. The singer, the actress, the wife, the mother, the star, and eventually, the woman trying to figure out who she was when the spotlight became quieter. But that part of Bette Midler's story was still ahead. For Bette Midler, the early 1980s were not supposed to look like this. She had already experienced the kind of success most performers spend their entire lives chasing. She had a hit album, a Grammy, Broadway experience, an Oscar nomination, and a reputation for being one of the most unpredictable performers in American entertainment. But suddenly, the momentum slowed. After the success of The Rose, Midler's 1982 film Jinxed became a major disappointment. The setback was more than a bad box office result. It came at a time when Midler was already struggling with the pressures surrounding her career and public image. Later accounts described a period in which she felt miserable and overwhelmed. For someone accustomed to controlling a stage, Hollywood could be brutally uncontrollable. One project could make you a star. The next could make people question whether you belonged there at all. Then, in 1984, something happened that had nothing to do with a movie or a record. Bette Midler got married. Her husband was Martin von Hazelberg, a performance artist and one half of the comedy duo The Kipper Kids. The two married on December 16, 1984, in Las Vegas, in a small ceremony officiated by an Elvis impersonator. It was an unconventional beginning to a marriage that would become one of the longest relationships in Hollywood. And it arrived at a crucial point in Midler's life. She was no longer simply trying to prove that she could become famous. She was trying to figure out what kind of life she wanted after becoming famous. That distinction would become increasingly important. Midler soon found herself back in the center of Hollywood. In 1986, she returned to the big screen with Down and Out in Beverly Hills and Ruthless People. Both were successful, and suddenly the actress who had seemed to be losing momentum was back. Then came Outrageous Fortune in 1987. Then Big Business. And then, in 1988, came the film that would become one of the defining works of her career, Beaches. Midler played C.C. Bloom, an ambitious performer whose lifelong friendship with Hillary Whitney, played by Barbara Hershey, becomes the emotional center of the story. The film gave Midler something more than another successful role. It gave her a song, Wind Beneath My Wings. Midler's recording became one of the biggest songs associated with her career. It won the Grammy for Record of the Year, and the song became inseparable from the emotional memory of beaches. For audiences, Midler could now represent almost anything. She could be funny. She could be glamorous. She could be abrasive. She could be vulnerable. And she could make people cry. That combination made her difficult to categorize, but almost impossible to replace. Yet while her professional life was accelerating again, her personal life was changing in a much deeper way. In November 1986, Bette and Martin welcomed their daughter, Sophie von Hazelberg. For Midler, motherhood introduced a responsibility that was different from every career challenge she had faced. A film could fail. A concert could end. A record could disappear from the charts. A child was different. There was no performance, no second take, no audience to impress. Just a person who needed her. By the time Midler's daughter was born, she had already spent years building a life around work. She had traveled, performed, recorded, acted, and lived through the strange intensity of being famous. Now she had to make room for family. And she did. In interviews years later, Midler spoke openly about how becoming a mother changed the rhythm of her life. She described marriage and motherhood as forces that made her more responsible and more settled. That didn't mean the career stopped. Far from it. The 1990s became another major chapter. In 1990, Midler starred in Stella, a drama that showed another side of her acting ability. Then came For the Boys in 1991, where she played Dixie Leonard, an entertainer performing for American troops across decades of war. The role earned Midler another Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. She also won the Golden Globe for her performance. The following years brought more movies. Hocus Pocus arrived in 1993. At the time, it was not simply the enormous cultural phenomenon it would eventually become. But Midler's performance as Winifred Sanderson gave the movie one of its most recognizable characters. Then came The First Wives Club in 1996. Again, Midler was surrounded by strong personalities, this time alongside Goldie Hawn and Diane Keaton. The film became a major commercial success and later developed an enduring place in popular culture. But something else was happening during these years. Midler was beginning to think beyond entertainment. She had spent much of her life performing in rooms filled with people. Now she wanted to change the physical world around her. In 1995, she founded the New York Restoration Project, an organization focused on restoring and maintaining neglected public spaces and gardens in New York City. Over the years, the organization became a significant part of her life away from entertainment. It was a different kind of performance. There were no standing ovations, no Grammy, no red carpet, no box office number, just work. And that mattered because Midler's life had become larger than the stage. By this point, she had already been married for more than a decade. She had a daughter. She had built an acting career. She had returned from professional setbacks. And she was beginning to understand that fame could not remain the only measure of a successful life. But the entertainment industry wasn't finished with her. Not even close. She continued recording albums, touring, acting, and appearing on television. She also returned to the stage repeatedly. In 2013, she appeared on Broadway in I'll Eat You Last, a chat with Sue Mengers, taking on the role of legendary Hollywood talent agent Sue Mengers. And then came another extraordinary moment. In 2017, at the age of 71, Midler returned to Broadway as Dolly Gallagher-Levi in the revival of Hello, Dolly. It was not a nostalgic appearance. She was carrying an entire Broadway production. And she won the Tony Award for Best Actress in a Musical. Think about how long that journey had been. The girl from Honolulu had once stood on a Broadway stage hoping for an opportunity. More than half a century later, she was still there. Still performing. Still drawing audiences. Still capable of making an entire theater revolve around her. But time had changed the meaning of those achievements. In her younger years, success meant proving herself. Now, success increasingly meant choosing what was worth her time. And perhaps that is one of the strangest things about getting older in public. The world continues to remember the younger version of you. The audience remembers the voice, the hair, the costumes, the movies, the songs. The woman who could walk into a room and instantly take control of it. But the person inside that image keeps moving forward. Bette Midler did too. She continued to appear in major projects. She returned as Winifred Sanderson for Hocus Pocus 2 in 2022, nearly 3 decades after the original film. And she remained connected to music, theater, environmental work, and her family. Her daughter Sophie also entered the entertainment world, becoming an actress. The family that began with Bette and Martin eventually became a 3-person story in which the daughter had grown up watching her mother live a life that was almost impossible to separate from the public eye. And yet, despite everything, Midler and Martin remained married. 4 decades after that impulsive Las Vegas ceremony, the marriage had survived something that destroys many celebrity relationships. Not 1 year. Not 5. Not 10. Decades. That doesn't mean the relationship was perfect. Midler has spoken about marriage in practical rather than romantic terms, emphasizing patience, compromise, and the willingness to work through difficult periods. And perhaps that tells us something about the woman she became. The younger Bette Midler built her career by refusing to fit neatly into anyone else's expectations. The older Bette Midler seemed increasingly interested in something else. Balance, family, work that mattered to her, and the freedom to decide when she wanted to be seen. That last part became more important as the years passed. Because the entertainment industry is built around youth. New faces arrive constantly. New voices replace old ones. The spotlight moves. Even stars who once seemed permanent eventually become memories. But Midler refused to disappear completely. She kept working. She kept appearing. She kept finding ways to surprise people. And yet, beneath all of those achievements, another reality was becoming unavoidable. The woman who had spent her entire adult life performing was getting older. The world could preserve her performances forever. It could replay The Rose. It could stream Beaches. It could bring back Hocus Pocus every Halloween. It could play Wind Beneath My Wings decades after its release. But none of those recordings could stop time. And as Bette Midler moved deeper into her 70s, the question was no longer whether she could still entertain an audience. The question was what she wanted her life to look like when she wasn't entertaining one. Because after 6 decades in show business, the brightest lights eventually become less important. And for a woman who had spent her entire life being watched, there was something almost strange about the possibility of simply living. Away from the stage. Away from the cameras. With her husband. With her daughter. With the work she chose to keep doing. And with the knowledge that the version of Bette Midler the public remembers most vividly is now separated from her by decades. That is where the final chapter begins. Not with the young woman from Honolulu. Not with the divine Miss M. Not with C.C. Bloom. Not with Winifred Sanderson. But with Bette Midler herself, approaching 81. Looking back at a life that has already contained several careers. And wondering, like so many people eventually do, what remains when the world no longer needs you to be the person you once were? Bette Midler is now 80, and on December 1st, 2026, she will turn 81. That number feels strange because the Bette Midler people remember does not seem to belong to the same timeline. They remember the woman who could fill a stage with nothing but her voice and personality. They remember The Rose, Beaches, Hocus Pocus, Wind Beneath My Wings, Broadway, Grammy Awards, Golden Globes, and the Tony Award she won for Hello, Dolly. But today, life is quieter. Midler has not disappeared. She continues to work selectively, remains active in environmental causes through the New York Restoration Project, and still makes public appearances. She also continues to speak about entertainment, culture, and the world around her. But she is no longer chasing the kind of career pace that defined her younger years. That may be the saddest part of getting older when your entire life has been public. The world keeps replaying your younger self while you are living in the present. Bette has spent more than 5 decades being watched. Now, much of what matters to her happens away from the stage. Her marriage to Martin von Hazelberg has lasted since 1984. Their daughter, Sophie, is grown and has built her own career as an actress. The family life Bette once had to fit around her career has become one of the most enduring parts of her story. And there is something deeply human about that. After all the awards, sold-out performances, movie premieres, television appearances, and years of being recognized everywhere she went, what remains is not a trophy. It is family. It is choosing where to spend your time. It is accepting that the body ages, careers change, and the public eventually moves toward the next generation. Bette Midler has never been someone who quietly faded into the background. Even now, she remains unmistakably herself. But almost 81 years old, she no longer needs to prove that she can command a room. She already did that. 4 decades. And perhaps that is what makes this chapter bittersweet. The world remembers Bette Midler at full volume. But real life is rarely lived that way. It becomes quieter, smaller, more personal. And after a lifetime spent entertaining millions, Bette Midler has reached the stage where the most important audience may simply be the people closest to her. The spotlight may not shine as brightly as it once did. But after everything she has lived through, she has something fame could never give her when she was young: the freedom to decide what matters now. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more deeply researched celebrity videos, and stay with us for the next chapter of another remarkable life.